A large model Showman'S engine, part 36, making the footrest assembly to mount on the engine. Quite a few traction engines that I've seen that are 4-inch or 4.5-inch scale have a riding seat mounted on the bunker. This is not a good idea on this engine. The bunker's made from brass and it's also very long. Taking into consideration my body weight, which is a bit on the high side, and these days it's seriously affecting my ballet classes. So I'm not going to mount a seat on the engine itself. My seat will sit on two wheels which will be pulled behind the engine. I have a friend called Bob Brocklehurst, and Bob owns Pugneys Light Railway in Wakefield, and Bob very kindly offered to weld together the driving truck. In a previous episode I showed the making of the axle for the two wheels, and this episode is all about making the footrests. When Bob came over to see me a few weeks ago, he brought some bits of steel with him, and I chopped these pieces of steel which gave me the angle for the footrest, which in turn gave me the height from the floor, which is 5 inches. And with the help of some 10mm studding that you can see on the bench, we mocked up the whole system. And as I mentioned in the episode where I made the axle, everything on this truck is 16 inches. It's really mad. The centre of the seat is 16 inches from the towing bracket. Between the axles it's 16 inches. Well, everything is just 16 inches. Just in case you're wondering why my voice is sounding different today, I woke up with a pain in my left eye. I get this sometimes. I get something in my eye while I'm asleep, and then my eye is sore for about 4 hours. And the weird thing about having a pain in your eye, it means that it makes your nose run. So my nose is running and I'm sounding a bit bunged up. It is not COVID-19. Anyway, that's enough about my physical decrepitude. What I'm about to do is thicken the towing bar. It's currently a piece of box section, but when I add a piece of 1/4-inch thick steel to the top of it, it's a perfect fit in the towing bracket. Here you see the principle. This is where the crossbar is going to fit. It will have 3 bolts that go all the way through, and here I'm marking the piece of steel so I can drill the holes for the other 2 bolts. I'm using the special marker pen that was given to me by a friend, and it's really useful for this job. It does work a lot better though if you hold the pen straight. I got it a little bit wrong. But it's really not a problem because I know where the holes need to be, even though the pen lines are not the same thickness all the way around. As always, the first drilling is a centre drilling, and this is followed by a 7/16 of an inch diameter twist drill. I've positioned the box section so the twist drill can actually come through the bottom without damaging the machine vise, which makes a change, because over the years I really have abused this machine vise. But 35 years later it still works okay. Here's the story so far. Originally there was 1 hole in the piece of box section, now there are 3. So I put it on the traction engine and I'm fitting the bolts, but I put it the wrong way around. Because the C-section towing bracket has the bunker strap running all the way through it, the holes are not right in the middle, and consequently the 7/16 holes in the box section are not in the middle, but when I turn it round everything's fine. And to avoid further confusion in the future, I've typed the letters L and R on the box section, so I know which way round to fit it to the engine. Now it's time to cut the piece of 1/4-inch thick steel plate. This is a job for my old metal cutting bandsaw, and it makes short work of the steel, mainly because I changed the blade recently. I'll leave the saw cutting the steel because I want to show you this bit. Fitted to the right hand side of the bunker tank is a water gauge. Here it is. Originally it was just a piece of windscreen washer pipe, but it wasn't easy to read, so I fitted a piece of glass. I'm going to try not to break this piece of glass. It's fitted using 2 pieces of thick-walled silicone rubber tubing, which act as a shock absorber mount for the glass. If ever I should break the glass, all I have to do is replace the bottom silicone rubber with another piece of silicone rubber fitted with a plug. This engine also has a belly tank, and the belly tank has a balancing pipe between itself and the bunker tank. The good thing is that there's an isolation tap fitted to the balancing pipe, so I would normally leave this in the closed position. The bunker tank was completely empty, so while I was cutting the piece of steel, I opened the tap to see how much water came from the belly tank into the bunker tank. And quite a lot of water came from the belly tank into the bunker tank. So I think I'm going to keep this tap closed and use the belly tank as a reserve. The bandsaw sawed its way through the piece of 1/4-inch steel very quickly. Now I need to bolt the piece of 1/4-inch steel accurately to the box section. The way I did this was to drill one hole through the 1/4-inch steel plate using the box section as a template. Then I fastened the parts together using one nut and bolt, put the whole assembly back in the cross vise on the milling machine and drilled the other 2 holes, after which I fitted another couple of nuts and bolts to make sure everything was in the right place. Now comes the important part. I need to mill a slot in the box section so I can attach the riding truck to the towing bracket on the engine. I measured the part and marked it out. Once again, I must admit that my marking out is generally horrific, but there's only me who ever sees it. To cut out the slot in the piece of box section, I'm using one of these excellent milling cutters sent all the way from Texas to me by a man called Michael. Thank you, Michael, they are really good. This is a slot drill, and as the name suggests, it's for cutting slots. It only has 2 cutting surfaces, and both of them are very sharp. These are very good quality milling cutters. This box section isn't very thick, and the first thing I'm going to do is just see how deep I can cut in one pass, and it would appear that this is nothing. So when I got to the other end, I wound down the milling cutter all the way through the work. Because this slot drill is a high-speed steel slot drill as opposed to a carbon steel slot drill, it's really sharp and stays that way. It really would be better to use some kind of coolant or cutting lubricant, but for the purposes of the video, I'm cutting it dry. You've probably noticed that the cutter is inboard of the line, and I've done this on purpose. Whenever you're milling a slot, it's a really good idea not to mill right up to the line, because the milling cutter could wander and you would end up with the slot being oversized. Always start inboard of the line, and once you've cut the slot, finally size it by moving the milling cutter closer to the edge and taking fine cuts. Or to be perfectly accurate, move the work closer to the milling cutter but still take fine cuts. One large slot cut in the piece of box section. I'm just checking that the slot is wide enough to accommodate the riding truck, and as you can see here, it's fine. There's plenty of rotation available. I further cleaned up the finish of the slot using my Proxxon motor tool with a flapper wheel fitted. I don't think I'm going to use these 2 pieces of metal called left outer and right outer because they're too thin anyway. I'm going to make something a little bit different. I'll show you this in the next episode. I just think the end product will look better, rather than being just a random collection of pieces of metal welded together. So that's it for this one. I'd just like to say stay healthy and be aware of the pandemic. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.